Good evening, everybody. All right, calm down. Are you excited to be at Vacation Bible School? Weak sauce. Are you excited to be at Vacation Bible School? Yeah! It's a shame it takes twice, you know? All right, everybody stand up. Stand up, stand up, stand up. All right, ready? I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry. I may never fly o'er the enemy, but I'm in the Lord's army. I'm in the Lord's army. I'm in the Lord's army. I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. Oh, I may never, but I'm in the Lord's army. All right, while you're standing up. Okay, everybody need to stretch a little bit. Okay. Might want to space out a little bit. Okay, everybody ready? Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Right on. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Right foot. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Left arm, right foot, left foot. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Right foot, left foot, and that tongue out. I'm one of them. That comrade. Tongue out. Turn around, sit down. Everybody is sufficiently warmed up. Okay, sit on the edge of your seat. I need a chair. There's a chair. Okay. Now, how many of you are familiar with this guy called the Wise Old King? Have you ever heard of this guy? Yes, no, maybe? All right. So here's how this works. When we say up, you stand up. When we say down, you sit down. When we say halfway, you go halfway. Everybody got it? All right, we'll go really slow. Because I have to. Because I'm out of breath. All right. There was a wise old king. He had 10,000 men. He marched them up the hill, and then he marched them down again. So when you're up, you're up. And when you're down, you're down. And when you're only halfway up, you're neither up or down. Got it? All right, wait. Does everybody got it? It's easy, right? Very easy. Cool, all right, so we'll speed it up a little bit. There was a wise old king. He had 10,000 men. He marched them up the hill, and then he marched them down again. So when you're up, you're up. Gotcha. And when you're down, you're down. And when you're only halfway up, you're neither up or down. I mean, I got you with the slow one. I don't know. Can y'all do faster? I don't think you can do it. All right, let's see what happens. Was the wise old king. He had 10,000 men. He marched them up the hill, and then he marched them down again. So when you're up, you're up. When you're down, you're down. And when you're only halfway up, you're neither up or down. There was a wise old king. He had 10,000 men. He marched them up the hill, and then he marched them down again. So when you're up, you're up. When you're down, you're down. And when you're only halfway up, you're neither up or down. I think I pulled a hammy. All right. Woo! I think I pulled a hamstring. Other than that, we're good. We are so glad that you are here. We'll sing a few more songs together at the end tonight when your group leaders bring you back in here. But for right now, we are going to go ahead and dismiss you to your first station. But as is our policy, we let the little ones go first. So nursery, you guys can be dismissed. Twos and threes, you guys can go with Miss Joetta right here. Twos and threes. Right there with Miss Joetta. Uh-oh. All right. Let's let them get out. So what do you guys want to talk about? Weather? Coyote? Bobcat? Duck? Did you guys find the duck? Did you find what happens to the little kids that touch the animals? It's these skulls that are up here. Don't touch the animals. A ram once touched an animal, and you see what happened to him. It was over. Yeah, you try and see what happens. All right. Fours and kindergarten, you can go. But some of them are six. Fours and five and some and six. Fours and some are six. Fours and some are six. Works, right? Kind of. What's that say? Okay. Smarter than I am. Not saying much. First and second grade, you can mosey on. Third and fourth, you can be dismissed. Please leave, 5th and 6th grade. Please leave. You're not dismissed. Just get out. Oh, don't go away mad. Just go away. Teenagers, I have a special task for you this evening. You ready? Starts with an H. Second letter's an E. Third letter's an L. Fourth letter's a. No, it's actually an A. It's weird. It was a Greek spelling. Just kidding. No, it is a P. You are assigned to help in classrooms, crafts, snacks. Go away. Show the love of Jesus to everybody, or else. Wait, I'm not sure that's how that works. Adults, if you will, it would be great if the adults would move up at least to where the little things are so that we can film correctly and get everybody videoed. So if adults, if you'll move up or sit there and stare at me, that's cool. Fine, whatever. Totally fine with that. But yeah, if y'all will move up to where the little banner thingies are, yeah, right there's fine. Yeah, y'all can move on down, all the way down if you want to. Y'all got to go help. You two have a task. You can rope her in if you want to.
All right. I'm assuming you can hear me. Let's see, we go to 8 o'clock, so I have an hour and 40 minutes. Wait, we have refreshments, right? Okay. We're not going to go an hour and 40 minutes. I can assure you of that. So I got the day off to a great start. Had my notes that I've been reading over for what I was going to do here tonight. Thought I probably need to take those with me because I won't go home before I come here. And can you guess what I did? I left them at home. So, on the way to Huntsville today and on the way back, I had to recreate all this in my head pretty much. And that wouldn't be too bad if it was a fairly simple topic. But that's not what we're dealing with. Creation seems like a pretty straightforward, good VBS topic. All the different things you can talk about when it comes to creation. And yet I got the topic to teach or talk about the age of the earth. The age of the earth. Does anybody know how old the earth is? That's a pretty good guess. Yep. What? Did you cheat? Yeah, let's go get something to eat. That's right. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And obviously, we are in a big contrast in our thought process between what the Bible teaches and what the Bible tells us in respect of the age of the earth versus what the science community tells us the age of the earth is today. And so you go and you can, pretty much any science book or any scientific website that you go to is going to tell you that the estimated age of the universe, and Scott mentioned this last night, is, according to their measurements and their calculations, 13.8 billion years. That's the universe. That's everything that exists. Then you will read that they will tell you that the earth is between 4.5 to 5 billion years old. And then you can read a little further and they will tell you that humans have been on the earth somewhere between 2 to 4 million years. Okay, so the universe, according to them, is almost 14 billion years old. The earth is around 5 billion years old. And people have been on the earth for about, let's say, 4 million of those years. That's a far cry from what we read in Genesis. I don't have to tell you all, you know it by heart, more than likely, that the first chapter of Genesis, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And very systematically, Genesis records what was created on each day. And those, I believe, were 24-hour days. So in 6 days, everything was created. That's what Genesis tells us. So Christians, I think, a lot of times are caught between these two definitions of age for the earth, and we don't know how to respond to people that tell us, well, it's 14 billion years old. Science has proven that. And a lot of times, not that it's not enough, because it is, but a lot of times we feel that a response of, well, you know, the Bible in Genesis says it was 6 days, that we feel like the people we say that to are going to go, the Bible? Really? Science, and you know we're all about science now, right? Science says that's not even close. And so some Christians will try to marry the two together and try to say things like, well, the days in Genesis weren't really 24-hour days. They were these extended periods of time. And what I would say to that is nice try. But that really is not going to work. So what do we do? What do we do with this vast difference in ages, and how do we tell ourselves, for one, but then how do we tell others that yeah, we believe what's written here, but there are other things that allow us to say what the Bible says is true. So how did we get here? And I may be stepping into tomorrow night's class. I don't know for sure, but I think Scott's teaching, so I'll apologize to him if I cover some of the stuff he was going to cover. But I wanted to take us through a little bit of time to show how we got to where we are with this way of thinking. So in the 1400s and 1500s, the world was coming out of what we typically call the Dark Ages. And so in the 1400s and 1500s, there was an increase, if you will, in things like literature and things like art. There was a real renaissance, and that's what it was called, the Renaissance age. So you had people like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and William Shakespeare, and you had all these people who were starting to think differently than had been done for all these years in the Dark Ages. After the Renaissance came the scientific revolution, 1600s, 1700s. And that period of time gave us people like Isaac Newton and Galileo and Copernicus and Kepler and all of these men that made huge scientific contributions to the human knowledge base. What sprang out of the scientific revolution is what we call the Age of Enlightenment. So this Age of Enlightenment, 1700s and 1800s, are where men started to really press on things like individual liberty, We don't want to be held back by what the church teaches. And when I say the church, I'm talking about the Catholic Church, or I'm talking about the Church of England. Free thinkers. I'm a free thinker. I think what I want to think. And no doubt there was a good bit of suppression by the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church on ideas and thoughts that they believed were contradictory to what the Bible taught. And so that tended to fuel, I think, these folks a little more. And so coming out of the Age of Enlightenment, you had the beginnings of the American Revolution. You had the beginnings of the French Revolution. You had ideas and philosophies like communism and fascism and socialism were all coming about in this period of time. So in the middle of the 1800s, there was a book that was published. And it was published by a fellow that had bought into this idea of free thinking and individual liberty. And I'm not saying that everything that comes out of the Age of Enlightenment is bad. It's not. Not everything's good either. It's just that more things are coming out, and people are more willing, if you will, to put their own ideas out there. So this fella went on a around the world cruise, if you will, as a naturalist, sailing out of England. He was picked to go and study nature and write down what he saw and learned on his trip. And so they sailed across the Atlantic Ocean and sailed down to South America and wound up over in the Eastern Pacific. And this was in 1830, somewhere along in there. They landed or stopped on this island chain that maybe you've heard of called the Galapagos Islands. And so he was looking at what nature, animals, plants that he saw there, and he noticed that on these different islands there were birds. I don't know about y'all, but does that bother y'all? I don't know how to turn that off. He noticed these birds that were similar but very different enough that they were noticeable. So he conceived in his mind what had happened to cause the birds on this island to be different from the birds on this island. That man's name was Charles Darwin. Everybody knows what Charles Darwin's book's about, right? Origin of the Species Through Natural Selection. That's the title of his book. So he is not the only, but he's one of the people that put the idea of evolution out there. And he based that on the things that he saw and the differences in these animals. And so in 1859, he published the book, Origin of Species, Survival of the Fittest. The animals that had the genes and the characteristics strong enough to survive did, and those that didn't died. And so over time, evolution has fanned out into all these different species that we have today. So on the surface, if I haven't spent very much time studying that, that seems reasonable. Something happened, right? These birds are different. So why are they different? Darwin and the people that followed his way of thinking said, well, at one time they were the same. And they have evolved over time. That's how it started. University of California, Berkeley, if there's not a more liberal university in this country, I don't know what it would be. This is on their website, talking about evolution. They make the statement, all life on earth shares a common ancestor. We are all distant cousins. Humans, oak trees, hummingbirds, and whales. And they have a picture on their website that shows on the left side something they call a tetrapod. I had to look that up. A tetrapod is just an animal with 4 legs. I don't know why they don't just call it a 4-legged animal. It's a tetrapod. And coming from that picture of the tetrapod are 4 lines. One line is a whale, one line is a human being, one line is a lizard, and one line is a bird. So they imply that all 4, a whale, a man, a bird, and a lizard, all came from the same animal. So what's needed now in order for that to be remotely possible is you have to have a very long time. You've got to have a super, super long time for something to change from a 4-legged tetrapod that looks sort of like a anteater without hair. That's what it looked like to me. For that thing to evolve into, that's going to take a long time. It ain't going to happen overnight. So by default, this idea of evolution requires a super long period of time. Now, I heard one guy say that evolution proves that the earth is very, very old. What I'm saying is a little bit different from that. What I'm saying is that in order for evolution to even have a possibility of being true, you got to have a super long period of time. So we have, all of a sudden, numbers start popping up in front of us that the world is 5 billion years old. What does that do? That gives the evolutionists the time needed for these unbelievable changes to take place. For a fish to develop legs and walk, or for some kind of 4-footed animal to develop a tail to swim, Those kind of things aren't going to happen overnight, and so you need a super long period of time. And so that's what we get. That's what we see. Because super long period of time supports the idea of evolution. It gives it the basis to happen. And so you'll read things like, we've found fossils that are 100 million years old. And the scientific community is trying its best to piece together the picture that will take us from where we are today to where we came from, as they say. We know where we came from, right? So that's how the age of the earth ties in to evolution. A 6,000-year-old earth does not sustain evolution. It's not enough time. It's not enough time. So after Darwin had made all these discoveries and postulated all of these ideas, several years later, because at the time that he was doing all this work, we weren't looking at the stars like we do today in order to gauge how old the universe is and whether or not the universe is static, meaning it's not growing, or is it shrinking, or is it expanding? What is it doing? That didn't happen until 1920s. We have a huge telescope in space today called the Hubble Space Telescope. You've probably seen pictures that telescope has taken. It's named after a man, Robert Hubble, who, and I don't know that I can find fault with this, although I don't know how it can really be proven or not, but in the late 1920s, he discovered, by measuring light shift, and I'm talking to you about way more than I know, but he measured the light shift in stars from a long way off, and he determined that the universe is expanding. It's moving out. So the curiosity that now comes into play is, well, what if you rolled all that back? If it's moving out, you ought to be able to go like this, right? And figure out how much time that is. And that's where this Big Bang theory comes from. If we can determine that the universe is expanding, then at some point, it's moving, so at some point, it had to be teeny tiny. Big Bang happened, exploded. There's a whole lot more to be talked about that. And has blown this universe of ours out to where it is moving away from us. And it's moved, the edge of it, if you can visualize that, which I always have trouble with that because the universe is all there is. And if there's an edge, then what's on the other side of the edge? I don't know. But that edge of the universe is moving away from us faster and faster. All right. So I told you all that stuff so that hopefully you can get a sense for why is evolution, why are we even dealing with that? And that's why, because that's how we got here. It wasn't overnight. It's over a period of 800 or 900 years, actually, that we got to this point. So you will, in 90% of the things you Google for age of the earth, you will see those kind of comments made. Those kind of things are written. And they're going to be written in a way that makes you think that it's absolutely known. Scott mentioned last night the difference between a theory and a law. Okay, so evolution is a theory. I'm going to talk about laws in a minute. It's a theory. And I've read many places where people have written that it is pretty close to law in their mind. So in order for a theory to become law, or any scientific principle or thought to be considered law, it has to pass every test, every time. Because if it fails the test once, whatever the test is, if it fails it once, it can't be a law, okay? So the reason we still call it the theory of evolution is there's some things that it doesn't pass very well. So this is where the arguments start happening. Creationists versus evolutionists. And they use the age of the earth as one of their marks in the sand to give some backbone to their idea that they believe that we all evolved from something that crawled up out of an ocean. It's basically what they teach. So there. 6 days, God created everything. If you look at a historical timeline and roll it back and count it down back through the Bible, which you can do, you'll find that Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, the beginning, probably around 6,000 years ago, 4,000 BC. So 4,000 years between Adam and Christ. That's what the Bible teaches. That's what is implied by the Bible. The Bible doesn't come right out and say it's this many years old. Could be older, a little bit older than that. Could be a little bit less than that. Nevertheless, the biblical account of the age of the earth is definitely less than 10,000 years old. One thing to note as well is that according to the biblical record, Adam and Eve were in existence at the beginning of creation, the beginning of the earth, the beginning of the world. They were there. I told you a while ago that science will teach us that the universe is 14 billion years old, that the earth is 5 billion years old, and that mankind is 5 million years old. Well, 5 million years is a long way from 5 billion years. So right there is a direct contradiction between what the Bible teaches. The Bible says that Adam and Eve, mankind, was right at the beginning of creation. Science wants to tell us that these numbers are so big, you can't hardly do them. 5 billion years minus 5 million years. Was that a bunch of millions of years before man ever showed up? So stories aren't telling, they're not the same. Just in in just a high-level look. All right, so now that we have that, what are we going to do with it? How are we going to counter what our science books teach us? What evidences are there for young Earth? The evolutionists will tell us that the Earth is old because you look at how the layers of the Earth are laid down. There's various things that they point to that say, see, that proves that ensures that the Earth is old. The fossils. This fossil is of some little bug is 5 million years old. So obviously whatever this thing was in the mud and got smashed and got embedded and turned to rock. And it took millions of years for that to happen. So what kind of things do we have other than Scripture? Scripture's first. But there are things out there that indicate that the earth is young. We don't know exactly how many years old the earth is. But we can be confident that it's not millions and millions of years old, even though that's what science wants to tell us. So, the predominant idea behind evolution is that over time, things change for the better. An animal that is some little simple-celled organism evolves into something that can have eyes and ears and a tail, and gradually, over all these millions of years, it can evolve into some very complex animal or person. That's not the way nature works. Nature does not work that left alone things get better and better and better. Doesn't happen. Here's an example. And y'all have your own examples. My granddad ran a store over in Zip City in the early 1920s and 30s. And so I remember going to that store after he passed away before I was born. And I think my grandmother might have run it for a little bit. But anyway, their house was right beside the store. Well, they kind of just closed the store up. And I remember Daddy taking me in there a few times to get stuff, and it was, scary in there for a little kid. So, that building has sat empty for the better part of 60 years. What kind of condition do you think that building is in today? It doesn't look like the Taj Mahal. It has completely fallen in. That's what nature does. Some of you in school probably had to take a class called thermodynamics. Anybody in here took thermodynamics? All right, one. Okay, so there are 3 laws, not theories, laws of thermodynamics. Law number one says energy is conserved. Energy is always conserved in a system. The second, and I was terrible at thermodynamics. I hated that class more than, well, there was one other class I hated more than thermodynamics. It was at the top of my list. Didn't like that stuff. But it's interesting when you don't have to get down into the details and actually learn it. So the second law of thermodynamics says that there is this thing called entropy. All right? Entropy. Entropy is an invisible force that brings disorder to the universe. Entropy is the measure of disorder in any system. Over time, entropy never decreases. Entropy always increases, which means things get more and more falling apart. The disorder becomes greater. Now, you can keep something like a car engine. You can work on that enough, and you can pamper it, and you can do things to it, and you can get a lot of miles out of your car engine. But you know what? Eventually, that thing's going to quit working. It's going to quit. And it's not because over time it's going to evolve into something bigger and better. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in mechanical systems. It doesn't happen in biological systems, plants, animals. That's a law. So the idea of something evolving to be better is really hard to accept and digest in light of this second law of thermodynamics that says there's entropy in every system, and it is what brings disorder to whatever you have that's put together. Anything that you have, if you leave it alone, it's going to fall apart. It's just going to fall apart. So what the law of nature is telling us is 180 degrees away from what the evolutionists want you to think. Mm-hmm. If there's an outside force that is, I think, with intentions of making that better, you can prolong it. The aging process. Are any of us in here getting younger? Not one of us. And we can do things to slow that down or to help us, but we're not going to get away from eventually everything's going to quit working. Yeah. Things quit working. You know, and I couldn't help but think of Ashton when I was reading through this. I think a lot of you know, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, whenever it was she was having all those issues, you know, with passing out, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And, you know, we took her to the doctor, eventually figured out that she had a heart condition. And so the doctors at UAB, I said, well, we need to do genetic testing on me and Jackie because she has a chromosome that was defective that caused this issue. One chromosome. And so we had to find out if I had it or if Jackie had it, and we passed it on to her. And if one of us had it, then we were going to have to test Jacob and Megan to see if they had it. We got tested. Jackie and I did. Neither one of us had that defect. So it was something that just popped up in Ashton. Didn't make Ashton's heart better. Not by a long shot. So the idea of evolving into something better is counter to what nature tells us is happening. To me, that's the first place to go to when you want to talk to somebody about, and they want to, promote the evolution thought. And I'm sure they'll have an answer because most of them do. But that's a hard thing to get around when it comes to the whole evolution concept. So entropy, the idea of entropy is something that can be used as evidence that evolution is not a improvement of things, but just the opposite. So if evolution is not a fact, not a law, then there's no need to have an old earth. You don't have to have an old earth. You can have an earth that's 6,000 years old, and everything's still good, and everything works. An old earth is what the evolutionists need. They've got to have that. Because if they don't have it, they can't get to where they need to be, going backwards in time. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Nope. That's right. They're looking hard. They're looking hard for those fossils and all, but you're right. That's why it's still called a theory. Yeah. Yep. That's right. Yeah, it's like why did the chimpanzees quit evolving and something else kept on and wound up being human? It right. We do. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. It does. Theory of evolution makes a mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. She's right. She's absolutely right. We are. We are. That's right. They don't have the other story. They don't have the real story. Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, that's some more of that free thinking that, is praised even today. I mean, we're past the age of enlightenment, but yeah, yeah. Well, and the thing about it is, like I said earlier, there were good things and bad things that came out of that. I mean, the philosophy of people like John Locke and Francis Bacon and those people that our founding fathers used to put together our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence and what our government should be like, that's good. Now we're tearing it apart. Yeah. But, Karl Marx was also in this age of enlightenment in the 1800s. And he wrote the Communist Manifesto. That's not a good idea. That was not a good idea. So this age of enlightenment is a two-edged sword. We got good things that came out of it, but we also, the Pandora's box, so to speak, is open, and all these other things come out. Because if I can think this, well, then I can think this. And then it comes down to who is the more charismatic, who is the more forceful, who is the more willing to keep pounding on it, and who can promote it, and then who is not so willing to stir the pot or fight it. Unfortunately. I'll touch on that a little bit. That is, Larry asked about carbon dating, and I'll talk about that for just a little bit. All of these things are that I'm just going to run through real quick here. They're complicated. There's just a lot to it, to each one of these things in figuring these out. A lot of variables, a lot of trying to understand what is a known and what's an assumption for when you're doing something. But that radiometric dating is what they will fall back on, they being these long, old Earth people, to say that these rocks are millions of years old or whatever. So let me run through these real quick, and then we'll wrap things up. So if the Earth was let's just say 1 million years old, if the Earth was 1 million years old, the population, taking into account war and disease and pestilence and all those things, in 1 million years of time, the world's population should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to the 2,000th power. So what that means is that number is 10 times 10, 2,000 times. That's a number that I can't even pronounce. I don't know how many it is. It's huge. 10 to the 2,000th power for 1 million years. What we have is a Earth population of 10 to the 9th power. 9. 2,000 versus 9. 8 billion people. That correlates back to an Earth that's how old? 4,000 to 6,000 years old. That's what today tells us. That's what today's population tells us. That the Earth is no more than 6 6,000 years old, 6 to 8, possibly 10, but probably more lines of 4 to 6. That's what today's population predicts. A million-year-old Earth would predict a population of 10 to the 2,000th. That's a lot of people. Ain't enough room on this planet for that many people. So that's one. Actually, that's two. The first thing that refutes an old Earth, and in turn, it really refutes evolution, which in my mind refutes old Earth, is the law of entropy, second law of thermodynamics. Second is this population, where the population would be if the Earth was that old. Here's another one. There's this stuff called cosmic dust. I don't know what it looks like. It's very, very fine. But apparently, about 14,000 tons of this dust falls on the Earth every year. $14,000 tons, not 14 tons, 14,000 tons. It comes from space, somewhere out in space. And so it falls on the moon too. So if that much dust was falling on the Earth every year, we would not have any oceans. They'd be filled up over a period of time. If the Earth was millions of years old and dust like that is falling at that rate every year for millions of years, we don't have any oceans full of this dust. That implies that if that much is falling, it hasn't been falling for a very long time. Because I saw the Gulf of Mexico just last year. It's there. Erosion. 27,000 tons. These are incredible numbers. 27,000 tons of land erodes into the oceans every year. So do that for 1 million years. Do it for 5 million years. I think scientists say in about 12 to 14 million years, all of the land would disappear and run off into the oceans. That hadn't happened. There's still land everywhere. So at that rate, it hadn't been happening for a long time, comparatively speaking, 6,000 years versus 14 million years. Believe it or not, this is number 4. These fossils that they have found and say that, are millions of years old, they've cut into some of these fossils and found soft tissue, which means the entire thing has not fossilized. Which also means that tissue, body tissue of these animals is probably not going to last millions of years. But yet they found it. They found little blood vessels. They've found soft tissue in some of these fossils that they've dug up. That strongly implies that they hadn't been there that long, which in turn strongly implies the Earth is not old. There's a couple of others that you can look these up if you want to find out more about them. But apparently there is they can measure the amount of helium-4 in the atmosphere of the Earth. That helium comes from the sun. It comes from the Earth's crust. An old Earth would have more helium in our atmosphere than what they can measure, than what they're measuring. So one of two things is happening. Either some of that helium is getting out, escaping our atmosphere so that we can't, it's not measuring what's really there, or the Earth's not that old. And there just hadn't been that much time for that helium to accumulate. The Earth's magnetic core in the middle of the Earth is the mantle. And you know we have a North Pole and a South Pole, which when I was reading about this struck me as funny, is we have them backwards. Because according to the magnetic polarity of the Earth, the North Pole is at our South Pole. So it's like, I want to find, who messed that up? Who's the guy that got that switched up? Some anyway. Oh yeah, no doubt. But the thing about the Earth's magnetic field is that today it is only half the strength as it was 1,400 years ago. So 1,400 years ago, it was twice as strong as it is today. 1,400 years before that, it was twice as strong as it was 1,400 years ago. So you see where I'm going? As you go back in time, that magnetic field gets stronger and stronger to the point where the Earth can't exist. The magnetic field around the Earth is too great. That implies a young Earth. Larry mentioned carbon dating, then we're going to quit because I've been up here almost an hour. Can't believe that. Carbon dating, what they call radiometric dating, and it's complicated. It really is. But they go in and they can look for the carbon, the element carbon, in a piece of rock, and then they can look for what they call daughter isotopes, which are the pieces of that carbon that break down into other elements. And they look at, you've probably heard of the term half-life, and that has a lot to do with, the radioactivity of an element in its half-life is when it breaks down. And so they use that to measure this breakdown of carbon in a rock. So what they assume is that those pieces, those isotopes of carbon, were not included initially in that rock. But there's nothing to say that they didn't exist in that rock at the same time that the carbon did. And so measuring dates based on that is, they say it's accurate, perhaps it is, but it's making a big assumption that that rock was uniform at its beginning. We don't necessarily know that. Don't necessarily know that. Yeah. So, so one of the main points that you all have brought up is there are a lot of assumptions that are being put out there as fact, and they're just not necessarily fact. Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. But what we've done, I think, in general, the general population, is that we have I don't know if this will sound right. We have bowed down at the altar of scientific knowledge. We have said, as general, not necessarily the people in this room, but in general, it's like, oh, that guy's a scientist. Well, he knows, or she knows. And they talk. They talk like they know. They're very confident in what they're telling. And if you haven't studied any of those particular fields, which most of us haven't and don't, it's easy to say, well, you know, I mean, I've been told this at work before. If you don't know what you're talking about, just act like you do. Now that's dangerous. I don't do that. But I had somebody tell me that, just act like you know what you're talking about. And 90% of the people will buy it. There'll be a few that'll be like, well, wait a minute. But most people will go, oh, I didn't know. Okay, I didn't know. That's what's going to happen. And I think that's what's happened to the general population when it comes to that. It's like, I don't understand all that stuff. Yeah, can you tell me? What is it? Oh, is that what it means? Okay. And run with it. And then on the other, on the flip side of things too, a lot of these guys back in, especially the scientific revolution and in this age of enlightenment, they were trying to get away from what the church was teaching. They were trying to, Galileo was punished severely by the church. Copernicus, who was the guy that said, we're all revolving around the sun, not the other way around. You can't say those things because the Church of England, the Roman Catholic Church, said, you're teaching blasphemy. And so that's what they had to deal with. And so, you have to admire, honestly, you have to admire these guys that were willing to go out and go against what was the prevalent thought of the day, and that's well and good. And the things that have proven out over time that are good, we accept them. The things that prove out over time that they're not provable or are bad, then we don't accept those. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. True. Yeah, there's that. That's probably a fact too. That. Right. That's right. That's right. People will go that route because they don't want to depend on what they call the God construct. That's just made up stuff from people years ago. I'm not buying that. I'm going where the science is leading me. The Bible's not a book of science. It's not a book of history. It's not a book of philosophy. It's not a book of math. It's not all that, but everything that's in regard to all those fields that's in here is right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so it's not going away. I mean, we've been dealing with it for 150 years now, and yeah. Yep. The Age of Enlightenment unleashed a lot of things on us. Some good, some not so good. Some in agreement with the Bible, some not. And we've got to be smart enough and willing enough to put forth the effort to learn enough to be able to say, I don't think you're right. I'm going to stick with this. I appreciate your attention tonight. Any comments before we finish? They'll tell you it takes millions of years, would be my guess. It doesn't take that long under the right conditions. And that's one more point to throw out here for you, and then I promise I'll let you go. The idea that is a common thread through the whole evolutionary thought process in the old earth concept and all, is this idea of what they call uniformitarianism. That's a big word. But it means that things are changing and happening at the same rate today as they were 1 million years ago, as they were. It's a constant, it's uniform. The opposite of that is catastrophism, which is not uniform, but some kind of catastrophe caused things to change. So when you look at layers in the Grand Canyon, and you see different colors, and you see straight lines, the evolutionists will tell you that that was done over a long period of time. Colorado River was running through there, and it cut through all of that through millions and millions of years. More likely, what happened in reality was those layers were laid down quickly, very quickly. And the reason they say that is because those lines between the different colors, the red, the brown, the white, they call them a knife's edge. If it was slow, as the evolutionists say, there would be erosion gaps in there. Erosion happens all the time. Animals get in there and dig and turn things over. You'd have something like this, but yet it's a straight line, which implies that boom, one went down, another one went down, another one went down, and there was no time for any erosion or any animal to get in there and dig and burrow like those armadillos in my yard. None of that stuff was happening. So there's just all kinds of things like that. That you can look at and point to not replace what the Bible teaches us, but to supplement that what this is teaching and what is in the Genesis record, that's how it is. So the earth is probably anywhere in the range of 4,000 to 6,000 years old, most likely. Let's go eat. I appreciate your attention. Thanks a lot. I think Scott's here tomorrow night. And if I talked about some of the stuff he's supposed to